Good day, everyone. HighRoad Solution is pleased to present this online webinar entitled The World of Content Marketing, Why It's the Hottest Trend for 2014. Our speakers for this presentation today are Mitchell Beer, Jenise Fryatt, and Suzanne Carwin. My name is Jeff Baker, and I will be your moderator for today's seminar. Today's presentation will last approximately 60 minutes and include a specific question and answer period at the end of the session. You may ask a question via the web conference system by typing it into the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen and then clicking the call-out button or hitting enter on your keypad. These instructions will be repeated later in the program. If you have any technical questions during the event, please email support@highroadsolution.com. Today's webinar is being recorded and all participant lines will be muted during the live program. I want to give a brief rundown of our speakers today. Having held global positions in the association, nonprofit, telecom, and event industries, Suzanne has had the joy of crafting the brand story for many companies and C-suite executives, providing the strategic marketing plan and overseeing the execution of digital, event, content, and channel marketing programs. An expert in branding and go-to-market strategies, Suzanne has launched dozens of products and programs and brought several companies to market. A longtime content marketer and event industry blogger, Jenise is a social media strategist for Smarter Shift, formerly known as the Conference Publishers. She is a member of the research team that produced 2 studies for Meeting Planners International, the strategic value of virtual events, and hybrid events, research and tools. She also co-organized Event Camp Europe, a hybrid event about hybrid events. She is a conference presenter on the topics of social media marketing strategy, social media for events, and virtual and hybrid events that she moderates, Smarter Shift's weekly Twitter chat about content marketing every Monday at 3 p.m. Mitchell Beer is a longtime entrepreneur for companies that focus on content. Founder of the highly successful Conference Publishers, Mitchell produced online and printed content for more than 3,000 conferences in more than 200 communities across 18 countries. Now, Mitchell has founded Smarter Shift, a Canadian-based company that expands Conference Publishers' focus on conferences to further specialize in content and social marketing strategy. Additionally, Mitchell is a longtime advocate for sustainable and green meeting design and has extensive experience in sustainability communications. He served for years as the Deputy Director of the Trottier Energy Futures Project, an effort to map 80% reduction in greenhouse gases by 2050, and has lent his expertise to the Green Meetings Industry Council, where he has served as their founding chair and board member. And with that, I would now like to turn the webinar over to Suzanne.
All right, thanks so much, Jeff. And Jenise and Mitchell, on behalf of all of HighRoad, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to take a different format today and spice it up a little bit, and really have more of a conversation about this idea of content marketing. So we have a couple kind of slides that we pulled out with some key questions that people have asked us, certainly, to cover. But also we want to really make sure, feel free to use the chat box to put in any questions that you want to, in the Q&A box, that you'd like us to cover and things that are top of mind, because this is really, well, we'll discuss it, but one of the questions is how new of a topic is this into the world of not-for-profit organizations? And also, of course, why is it so hot? So let's just get right into it. So here's Mitchell and Jenise. If you haven't seen them and you've never seen them on Twitter or been following them, highly recommend it. This is Smarter Shift. And we'll also post up their individual Twitter handles as well. So first of all, I just wanted to give, again, a warm welcome to both of you. And, just give me, go ahead and give me the commercial, if you will, on Smarter Shift for just a couple of seconds, just so people understand what Smarter Shift does. I think it'll give some context of why you guys are such experts in this area, and we've asked you to come and join us today. And then if you can kind of just give us a little bit of like what a typical kind of project that you guys are now working on.
Well, thanks for that, Suzanne, and everybody. Thank you for joining us. It's Mitchell here, obviously. When we made the transition to Smarter Shift from the Conference Publishers, it was because we realized that there were so many organizations out there that had vast archives of fantastic content. It was just sitting there in the vault. Most of it was still fresh, up to about 5 years old. What wasn't fresh could be easily refreshed. But these organizations either didn't have the strategy to figure out what to do with that material, or if they had the strategy, they didn't have the in-house bandwidth to do the work. It was some variation on, oh, that's something the intern can do over the lunch hour, right? And people are finally working out that that doesn't work. At the same time, we were in the midst of the probably most powerful communications revolution since Gutenberg in the form of social media. And people were assuming that they had to get on Twitter so that their teenagers would stop mocking them for not being on. And the solution was to tweet what they had for breakfast and cat photos. So in one corner, we had this phenomenal cluster of communications tool. On the other side, incredible content that nobody knew what to do with. And to us, a smarter shift is about slamming those two problems together to solve them both.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And so I want to point out also that HighRoad's, partnered in some way with Smarter Shift, and, we're going to consider them kind of an industry partner because so many organizations, that we see, they are sitting on this archive, this rich, they're so good at creating content, so bad at being able to pull it together into a strategy and then distribute it effectively. So I think you've got some really good combination here between HighRoad and Smarter Shift. So let's get into it. So let's just start with the basics, right? Let's start with this basic question. I know we get this all the time at HighRoad. I'm sure you guys do at Smarter Shift, and hopefully people are finding you to do this. But, when people ask, what is content marketing, let's just start with a very 101 question there of how do you approach talking about that?
Okay. Well, I had Joe Pulizzi's quote from a Twitter chat that I was on 2 days ago, which addressed this exact question, and I had it ready, but I'll paraphrase it. And basically what he said was the sharing of useful and interesting information consistently over the course of time in an effort to derive a, profit, I can't remember what the exact term, but basically in an effort to sell something, So the difference between content marketing and traditional marketing, because of course there's a lot of people who will say all marketing is content, and you could actually make the case for that. But what content marketers deem as content is information that's useful. It doesn't necessarily have to be about a product. It's information that makes you useful to the people that are reading your content. So you may be sharing how-tos about something. Actually, how-to posts are among the most popular forms of content that is shared in content marketing. You may be sharing information that's specifically about your product or your service. Or you may be sharing something else that's of use or of interest to your target market. Basically, the idea is you are building a relationship over time while at the same time building thought leadership and credibility. And how this is done is you're constantly sharing content that's not always about specifically selling your product or service. When people believe that you are trying to contribute to their community, make their lives better, and not just always in an effort to get something back, you build that kind of trust and credibility.
At one point, Jenise said that it isn't necessarily about selling, and I think something that comes as a shock to a lot of people who, came up in a more traditional selling mode is that, in fact, there are, I think probably at most points when you're content marketing, not only is it not necessarily about selling, but it's necessarily not about selling. And just to give that a reality check, I would almost like to do this as an online poll, but not quite. Ask yourself, how much do you really enjoy being on the receiving end of an unsolicited promotional email? Or even an email that is theoretically solicited because, yeah, okay, fine, I did click that link. I don't quite remember, but I'm sure I did. I didn't think they were going to sell at me. How receptive are you when the phone rings at home at dinner time, again, when you have 2 children under 5 at home, or even if you don't, okay? That's the traditional selling mode. Most of us were raised and trained in it. I know I've been selling one thing or another since I was 11, and I'm 55 now. And I promise you I won't quote that longer story. But the contrast is that with content marketing, you really are genuinely, you're not just saying, oh, sure, yes, I want to build a relationship with you. I really want to understand what your organization needs. And meanwhile, you know, and the person you're talking to knows that in back of you is a director of sales who says, look, tell them whatever you want. Just hit your quarterly target. With content marketing, you really are in for the long haul. You really are in to genuinely, not just as a positioning statement, establish yourself as a valued member of the community and find out what conversations will flow from that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say the underlying assumption, and it really does prove to be true, is that when you build relationships in this way over the long term, really focusing more on building credibility and trust and thought leadership, you get people that are fanatical about your brand. Not only are they willing to purchase your products or your services, but they're willing to tell everybody about you.
They know you, they like you, they trust you because you've given them good reason to. It's not just a commodified relationship.
Yeah, and I'd add to that I think content marketing is also, it changes, and maybe we get into this a little bit in a couple more questions deep, but it changes the process is no longer, like you said, Mitchell, about just selling, where selling is you're talking about what you have to offer, what your thing does, does better than other things. And content marketing is really about focusing back on topics. It's bigger picture. It's more abstract, perhaps. You're not doing this with kind of a, per se, a very obvious contractual kind of relationship of something you're trying to get out of the person who's reading it. You're just creating content that is of value. Certainly it's going to showcase your opinions and, and what your, the thought processes you're trying to put out there. And it's still persuasive per se, but it's doing so in a more indirect manner. And again, kind of putting the power back into the user, and the user decides now whether or not that's useful to them, right? So it's more of a, I'm here, and here's like a lot of knowledge. It's kind of like the library, right? So the library's there, it's there, it's holding a lot of content and books, and if you want that, you know where to go and get it, and you're going to find value there.
I think
but it's that type of thing.
I think that's exactly it. The library is there when you need it, unless somebody's just gone through another round of cutbacks, and nobody's cutting us back. We'll be there, right? But
right, nobody's knocking on your door trying to sell you the book.
Exactly,
selling you encyclopedias.
Precisely. Hey, thank you for that. That's a really cool analogy. It's the difference between a library and an encyclopedia salesperson. Somebody should do a blog on that. But not try to sell you on anything by writing that blog. It's sharing knowledge. And the difference is exactly what you said, that when what you're doing is establishing yourself as an undisputed source of the knowledge on which your product or service is based, whatever that product or service is, knowing that a certain proportion of the people who are reading this, and you won't know exactly which ones necessarily, will file away that information so that when they know when they need that particular expertise, they'll know where to turn. And the crucial difference is you're not going out and cold calling and trying desperately to get them on the phone, hoping against hope that you'll happen to get them in the nanosecond when they're already thinking of you, because if they're not, then you're intruding, right? When they contact you, they've set the pace and they've raised their hand. And a colleague of ours makes the point very well, somebody who's very involved in this form of inbound marketing as well, that by the time that prospect makes contact with you, they've thought of you, they've read your material, they've probably visited your website to confirm what they thought they understood about what it was that you know and what you do. By the time they call, they're pretty much pre-sold. They've made the decision. And they're calling you to find out, and frankly, I mentioned that I've been selling things for way too long, and it's a long time since door-to-door catalog sales, right? But I never used to enjoy doing that kind of selling there. I've admitted it in public. And for the first time, we're not trying to sell anything, and that's not a selling line. And it's so liberating. And so effective, I have to add.
Yeah.
I would add, though, I think it's really crucial to add that the difference between us and a library or an information resource when you're doing content marketing is the human element. a book will not respond to you when you have a question or a comment about the content you've put out there. A person will. Also, most of the time, much of the time, and I'm not saying in all cases, but in many, many cases, it's much better to put content out there from a human kind of personal perspective, because again, the more that you can make yourself a human, not only do you become a trusted information resource, but you become a trusted friend. Okay, so how much more likely are you going to be purchasing something from a friend as opposed to an information resource?
Yeah, now that's a really interesting piece. I think maybe I want to ask you guys a question, because I think I definitely I'm smiling. You guys can't see me, but I'm smiling because I know the answer to it, but I want to hear I want to hear what you guys say this. And I say this kind of tongue in cheek because we're talking specifically about let's take the association market as a whole. Now, the not-for-profit market, where it's more on the fundraising side or more on the nonprofit side, I think they've always kept that human